Welcome back to episode number 7 of ECW on FX, and tonight we have probably the riskiest main event we've done. This could be the worst show so far. Hopefully the two men can deliver as Xavier faces Sonny Siaki inside a steel cage. The loser of the match will leave ECW. Of course, with that stipulation and that storyline implication, it kind of has to go on last because it will be the most important thing on the show. But knowing how the two have performed in the past, we'll have to wait and see as to whether it can deliver and give us a decent show, or hopefully, if some of the segments around it can help boost us up and make it at least a passable episode of ECW on FX. The pay-per-view is coming very, very soon, so we can't afford really to have too many bad shows. CM Punk and then RVD make their entrances to open the show. They will be teaming in the first match of the night. As they await their opponents, the commentators recap the events of last week with a bit of footage shown of Paul Burchill's victory over Tommy Dreamer. They also talk about tonight's main event, Sonny Siaki v Xavier in that steel cage match. The loser leaves ECW. So it's not really a great segment from them, and it's followed up with a pretty average match. You'd hope for better involving these two. We see there RVD with a 72, CM Punk with a 62, showing that those two losses have hurt him a little bit, and we do need to build that momentum back up to be getting those CM Punk level performances that we've come to know from him. Stevie Richards and Cedric Anderson, fairly average. Cedric Anderson is the one pinned by CM Punk in a match that goes just over 5 minutes. Extremely short, so there's not much more to say about that, but RVD was head and shoulders above everybody else. It's really a disappointing opener, I have to say. When you put CM Punk and RVD in a match, you definitely expect better than that. But the post-match sees Rob Van Dam take a microphone and he promotes his match with Rhino at Living Dangerously. He talks about taking back the World Championship, the title that he never lost, but this draws out the World Champion Rhino and his right-hand man, Jerry Lynn. Rhino, from the top of the ramp, tells Rob Van Dam to ask Tommy Dreamer or Brent Albright, which causes Jerry Lynn to laugh, or his buddy CM Punk, how that plan panned out for them. Rob Van Dam responds that he knows Jerry Lynn better than anybody, and Rhino is yet to face anybody like him in ECW. RVD too is yet to be pinned or submitted since return to ECW, and he's been here for twice as long during this run. Rhino had little to say to that, so instead raised both of his titles in the air, interjecting as the champion and challenger stared each other down. CM Punk reminded them that whatever the result of Living Dangerously, he was going for the winner because he wanted his rematch. So that's a much better segment. Rhino terrible without a script, his dialogue being a mess to follow. That's a note we get pretty regularly with Rhino, so possibly we need a different mouthpiece for him. Jerry Lynn not really that good on the mic, CM Punk doing well as he normally does, and it does gain heat to the storyline, so that is good to see. Returning from the break, the commentators talk over images of the steel cage that hangs above the ring tonight. We're promoting that main event, Sonny Siaki and Xavier going one-on-one inside that cage. The stipulation that the loser will leave ECW. Following the footage of the match being made last week, the commentators discussed the implications of that stipulation. If Sonny Siaki lost, the Hustle would see their ranks reduced to just Homicide and the Havana Pitbulls. However, if Xavier loses, Low-Ki would once again stand alone in ECW and be likely to lose his shot at the World Tag Team titles that they earned on the first episode of ECW on FX. In the back, we continue the hype with Homicide shown pacing back and forth. He's clearly nervous, while Sonny Siaki is sat in the corner of the room with his head in his hands. On the other side of the room, the Havana Pitbulls sit deep in discussions, although we can't really hear what they're saying. No words were said between Homicide and Siaki throughout the course of this segment, but it's clear that tensions are very high going into that huge main event. Elsewhere, Xavier is interviewed, and it's not a good segment either, looking equally nervous ahead of the do or die main event match. Jade asks him how he feels in reflection if tonight is his last night in ECW, about how things transpired between him and the rest of the Hustle. Xavier says that he has no regrets about what happened, and he feels no sympathy for what he has to do tonight. Xavier tried to keep his confident, calm demeanour throughout the promo, but it was clear that he was feeling the pressure. Xavier paused for a second to compose himself, and Low-Ki put his arm on his partner's shoulder. Key told Xavier that he's got this and closed the interview, telling Jade the Havana Pitbulls better take notes because they're coming for the titles at Living Dangerously. So we really need the show to pick up after this, both struggling when going off script and producing a pretty poor segment. Again, we're trying to promote this main event, but the segments really aren't living up to it. We then get another decent average match, but it's not where we need it to be. The Stampede Bulldogs, TJ Wilson and Harry Smith, defeating Brent Albright and Chad Collier. Collier and Albright haven't done well since ECW debuted on FX, and this is another damaging defeat for them. Fairly similar, all the performances. Chad Collyer at the worst of the bunch, Brent Albright and TJ Wilson pretty much identical, so we can't take a great deal from that. But as TJ Wilson and Harry Smith celebrate in the ring, William Regal makes an appearance. He is flanked by, I suppose, clients we can call them, Brian Danielson and Nigel McGuinness. Having just watched another impressive performance by the Stampede Bulldogs, Regal entered the ring and shook hands with the two men, giving them a few words of encouragement. He then took a microphone and offered them their first ever pay-per-view match, a tag team showcase against Danielson and McGuinness at Living Dangerously. Wilson and Smith looked up for the challenge, and the four competitors shook hands to seal the deal. So the best segment on the show so far, or maybe the second best segment on the show so far, we had that promo between the Living Dangerously main eventers, but that's the kind of thing we need to see, and we go into another very good segment. There still is hope for this show, a pre-recorded segment with Steve Corino in a boxing gym with Paul Burchill, who is preparing for the Rippers match with CM Punk at Living Dangerously. They're not at the building tonight. Paul Burchill is shown laying vicious shots into a punching bag as Steve Corino shouts words of encouragement. The package ends with Steve Corino talking about the match, promoting Paul Burchill, and saying that from the evidence he has seen, CM Punk stands no chance against the undefeated Paul Burchill. We then get another backstage segment with Becky Bayliss, our secondary interviewer. She was trying to get a word with Paul Heyman. He'd been scheduled to speak, but was told at the last moment that the chief of ECW had requested it be rearranged for next week. He'll talk on the Go Home show. Brent Albright obviously hadn't got the memo about how busy Paul Heyman was, however, as he stormed into the office. The cameras then caught him telling Heyman that he wants Jerry Lynn at Living Dangerously. He wants to laugh at him. He wants to take the piss about him being beaten by Rhino, but he's going to fight him, and he's going to wipe that smug look off his face. Paul Heyman is annoyed to be interrupted, but recognised the fire shown by Brent Albright. He told him that he'd get his match at the pay-per-view. And the main event isn't too bad. It could have been worse involving these. A 34 from Sonny Siaki we see, so Xavier really has dragged the match up. It has gained heat to the storyline. It is a good match considering it's these two, but it's probably not going to be enough to reach our minimum requirements. As far as the match goes, the idea is that Sonny Siaki is more powerful and strong than Xavier, so he can throw him about, throws him into the steel cage, basically uses the brutality of their environment to gain the advantage in the match. However, just when he appears to be closing in on the victory, we get the comeback, the fire, the intensity from Xavier that we want to see if he is to continue to be pushed as a serious threat. And eventually, in the middle of the ring, he locks in that crossface. Sonny Siaki has nowhere to go, no escape, and he taps 1, 2, 3 to end his ECW career. After the steel cage rises from the ring, Sonny Siaki rolls out to the outside and low-key joins his partner Xavier in celebration. The commentators put over the emotions involved in the match and the weight lifted off the mind of Xavier. He will go on to team with Low-Key at Living Dangerously, challenging for the World Tag Team titles currently held by the Havana Pitbulls. On the other end of the spectrum, Sonny Siaki looked distraught as he walked up the ramp with his head down. No sign of homicide to show any support to the muscle of the hustle. The commentator said that it was never nice to see anybody lose their job, but added that Sonny Siaki had brought this upon himself. He turned round to take one last look at the fans and was eventually joined by Ricky Reyes and Rocky Romero. While the leader of the hustle had no time for the man who has done much of his bidding for the last year, at least those two did offer him some comfort. Nonetheless, the focus was on Xavier and Low-Key. They had no sympathy for the now unemployed Sonny Siaki, instead indicating that they were coming for the World Tag Team Championships. So it's a 58 C-. It is not that far below, 4 points below the minimum requirement, and I'm considering how the show started, I really expected it to be worse. So not a disaster, but not where we need to be. Hopefully we don't get too many more shows like this, especially next week's Go Home show, needing to build the hype for the pay-per-view. Living Dangerously coming very, very soon. The card is coming together for that, and I'm just going to see what the TV ratings were like for this show now. So Impact are back over 1 million viewers off the back of their Destination X pay-per-view, but we get a 2.30, which is by far our best television rating so far. Xavier and Sonny Siaki, that huge stipulation, obviously a draw. I thought in terms of names on the show, that was the least impressive card that we've put together really. Not very many well-known national names. Pretty much all the networks unhappy with the quality of the show, despite it being the best rated show we've done. that doesn't really matter. A good note there, Rhino is impressed with Rocky Romero. Tommy Dreamer also impressed with Harry Smith. So our youngsters and the rising names in ECW getting good praise from the veterans, and that brings the end to the show. Next week, the Go Home show, Living Dangerously, is just 9 days away, and I'm really looking forward to that first pay-per-view of the ECW on FX era.